Welcome to the silent verdict.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray.
Ever imagined your car just like vanishing after a routine traffic stop? We're plunging into Aurora, Colorado's brand new 3 strikes traffic law today. A single encounter could actually leave you carless.
Yeah, it's quite something. Aurora, Colorado, they recently enacted this traffic law, right? And it targets drivers found operating a vehicle without a valid driver's license, current proof of insurance, and valid license plates.
All at once.
All at the same time, yeah. And this isn't about, racking up violations over time.
Not the usual 3 strikes.
No, exactly. It's the simultaneous presence of these 3 specific issues that triggers immediate towing and impoundment.
Wow. Okay.
And the law, it took effect last November 5th. The idea was to combat this rising number of unregistered and uninsured vehicles in the city.
So our mission today, let's try and dissect this 3 strikes law, like how it works, who it really impacts, the reasons behind it, and naturally the controversies it's kicked up. We want to give you the complete picture of this really, unique approach to traffic enforcement.
Definitely unique.
Okay, so this 3 strikes rule, it's not what most people probably think of, right? What exactly sets off this immediate impound?
Exactly. You got to forget the idea of multiple speeding tickets or, past offenses adding up.
Right.
This law is laser focused on a specific moment, a traffic stop. A stop where a driver just cannot produce a valid license, proof of insurance, and up-to-date plates.
All 3 missing.
All 3 are missing at that instant. If that happens, the impound process begins right there. It's that specific combination, that trio that pulls the trigger.
So if an officer pulls someone over and bang, hits this unlucky trifecta, their car is immediately towed.
Yep, gone.
What's the aftermath then? What hurdles does the driver actually face to get their vehicle back, and are there other consequences lurking?
Well, the immediate aftermath is, like you said, towing and impoundment. Now, to reclaim their vehicle, the owner has to jump through quite a few hoops.
I bet.
First, they've got to provide solid proof, actual documentation that they now possess a valid driver's license, current insurance for that specific vehicle, and valid registration with updated plates.
Okay, so you have to fix all 3 problems first.
Correct. Then comes the financial hit. They have to pay all the towing fees and the accumulating daily storage costs. And those can escalate pretty quickly,
Oh yeah, storage fees are no joke.
They really add up. But that's not even the end of it. The driver still has a mandatory appearance in county court.
For the original tickets.
Exactly. To address the original tickets for each of those violations, no license, no insurance, no plates, and those carry their own separate fines and potential penalties.
Now, whenever a new law like this pops up, there's often that suspicion, right, that it's just a sneaky way for the city to boost its revenue.
You hear that a lot.
Is that the case here with Aurora's 3 strikes law? Is the city actually seeing a financial windfall from all these impoundments and tickets?
So here's where it gets really interesting, actually. Currently, the city of Aurora itself doesn't directly pocket the fines collected from these 3 strikes violations.
Oh.
How does that work? Well, because these are violations related to state-issued things, right? Driver licenses, vehicle registrations.
State-level stuff.
Yeah. So any resulting tickets and the fines that come with them, they're processed through the county court system.
Okay.
So the money from those fines goes to the county and the state, not directly into Aurora's city coffers.
Huh. So that kind of challenges that immediate assumption of a revenue grab by the city itself.
It really does, at least for now.
That's a surprising twist.
Yeah.
So Aurora isn't directly benefiting financially right now, but I think I heard there might be a shift coming down the line in how these violations are handled.
Yeah, that's right. If we connect this to some broader legislative activity, there's actually a bill currently making its way through the state legislature.
Okay, at the state level.
And if this bill passes, it would grant city courts, including Aurora's, the authority to directly handle cases involving these driver's license and vehicle registration infractions.
Ah, so they could change things.
It could. So while the fines currently bypass Aurora, the potential exists for that to change in the future, depending, on what happens with this statewide measure.
Definitely something to keep an eye on then.
For sure.
Now, a law this impactful, it's bound to spark debate. What are the main arguments for and against this 3 strikes approach? What are the different sides saying? Is this smart or is it overreach?
Oh, definitely debated. On one side, you have strong support from some members of the city council. Their argument really centers on a growing public safety concern.
Okay, safety first.
Right. Fueled by what they see as an increasing number of unregistered and uninsured vehicles on Aurora's roads. They've pointed out some vehicles were operating with expired tags going back years.
Years, wow.
Even before the pandemic, indicating, a really significant underlying problem that, in their view, required a decisive response, like this one.
Okay, so that's the pro side. What about the pushback?
Well, on the other hand, there's considerable criticism, both from other city council members and community advocates.
And their main point.
They argue the law is excessively punitive, particularly for residents with lower incomes. The immediate impoundment, they say, can create this cascade of severe hardships.
So?
Well, for those who rely on their cars for, basic necessities, getting to work, getting kids to school, losing that car suddenly can potentially trap them in a cycle of poverty. They can't get to work, can't earn money to fix the car issue.
Right, it becomes a downward spiral.
That's the fear, yeah.
Okay, so we understand the mechanics, the what of the law. Now let's dig a bit deeper into the why. What are the fundamental arguments being made by those who champion this strict enforcement? What's the core of their case?
Yeah, the bedrock of the proponents' argument is really public safety. Full stop.
Yeah.
They underscore the substantial risks associated with unregistered vehicles, but even more critically, uninsured vehicles.
Right, the insurance part is key.
It's huge. I mean, imagine the scenario. An uninsured driver causes a serious accident. Significant injuries.
Yeah.
The victims in such a case could be left facing enormous medical bills, long-term care costs, with basically no avenue for financial recovery from the driver, especially if the driver doesn't have assets.
They're just out of luck, financially speaking.
Potentially facing devastating personal bankruptcy. It's this fear, this reality of financially ruinous consequences for accident victims, that's a primary driver behind the support for this law, the idea that it acts as a strong deterrent against uninsured driving.
That paints a really concerning picture. Absolutely. The potential fallout is massive. Now, flipping the coin, what's the central argument from those who oppose this law? What are their main worries and objections?
The heart of the opposition's argument revolves around the law's punitive nature, as we touched on, and its potential for a disproportionately harsh impact on individuals with limited financial resources.
The fairness argument.
Exactly. For someone already struggling economically, the sudden impoundment of their only vehicle can be, catastrophic.
More than just an inconvenience.
Oh, much more. It's not just the immediate burden of towing and storage fees, which, again, can be substantial, but it's also the subsequent difficulty of obtaining a valid license and insurance without their vehicle. How do you get to the DMV? How do you get to an insurance agent? How do you get to work to earn the money for all this?
It creates a vicious cycle.
That's the concern, yeah. It hinders their ability to get to work, earn income, and ultimately meet the very requirements needed to reclaim their car. The fundamental worry is that this law might inadvertently punish poverty itself, rather than simply addressing the lack of required documentation.
It really forces you to consider that balance, doesn't it, between ensuring public safety for everyone and the potential for significant individual hardship.
It's a tough balancing act.
So the big question then, is this law actually achieving its goals? Do we have any early data that suggests whether it's having the intended effect? Is it reducing unregistered and uninsured drivers?
Yeah, that's the critical point, right. And the initial data offers a fascinating, albeit early, snapshot.
Okay, what are the numbers showing?
So looking at police and court records from the first few months, right after the law took effect on November 5th, we've seen a clear trend in the number of vehicles impounded under this specific law.
A trend which way? Up or down?
Down. In November, the first month, there were 195 impoundment.
Okay, nearly 200.
Then that number saw a notable drop to 177 in December, followed by a further decline to 135 in January, and then 131 in February.
So a pretty consistent downward trend over those first 4 months.
Yeah, quite consistent.
That's a significant decrease. What could be driving that? I mean, is it a sign the law is working as intended, getting people compliant? Or could there be other factors at play?
Well, it's tough to draw definitive conclusions from just this initial data,
Sure, it's early.
One plausible explanation is that the law is indeed having some deterrent effect. The very real threat of immediate vehicle impoundment might be prompting more drivers to, get their paperwork in order.
Makes sense.
However, another possibility is that the initial high numbers in November reflected maybe a more intensive initial enforcement effort, something that naturally tapered off a bit in the following months.
Like an initial blitz?
Could be. Or, as some have suggested, perhaps the law quickly removed a significant number of the most persistent offenders early on. So there are simply fewer instances now where drivers have all three violations at the same time.
Interesting. So the pool of offenders might have shrunk quickly.
Possibly. We really need more data over a longer period to understand the underlying causes of this decline. Is it deterrence, enforcement changes, or something else?
Right. And what about the vehicles that were impounded? Did most people eventually manage to get their cars back?
Yeah.
What's the success rate, so to speak, of retrieval?
So the data through February indicates that, yeah, a substantial number of impounded vehicles were eventually reclaimed by their owners. They managed to provide the necessary documents and pay the fees.
Okay, so many are getting them back.
Yes, but, and this is a really significant point, a total of 38 vehicles impounded during that initial period were never retrieved.
Never retrieved. What happened to them?
They were subsequently sold off at city car auctions.
Wow. 38 cars just gone.
Yeah. That's a pretty stark reminder of the ultimate consequences for some vehicle owners under this law, people who, for whatever reason, couldn't meet the requirements to get their car back.
38 vehicles unclaimed. That really underscores the potential long-term impact on those individuals. It's not just a temporary problem for everyone.
Not at all.
So, looking back at the implementation, the early effects, what would you identify as the most significant turning points in this whole unfolding situation?
Okay, turning points. I think the first clear one is undoubtedly November 5th of last year.
The start date.
Exactly. That's the day the three strikes traffic law officially went into effect in Aurora. It marked a fundamental shift in how these specific violations would be handled and enforced. It's the point of no return, you could say.
Absolutely. That's day one. What else stands out as a key moment or development?
I'd say the consistent monthly decline in the number of impounded vehicles we just talked about, November through February.
That downward trend.
Yeah, that trend is a crucial turning point because it immediately raises questions. Questions about the law's short-term impact, its potential long-term effectiveness, its sustainability. Is this a temporary dip, or is it a lasting change in driver behavior or enforcement focus?
Definitely a trend that demands closer attention as time goes on. What else makes your list of pivotal moments?
The fact that 38 impounded vehicles were ultimately auctioned off.
The ones never reclaimed.
Right, because their owners either couldn't or didn't retrieve them. That's a really significant turning point, I think. It moves beyond just impoundment numbers and highlights the very real, irreversible consequences of this law for a segment of the population. These are vehicles permanently lost to their owners.
That really puts a human face on the statistics, doesn't it?
It does.
And, okay, maybe one final turning point that you see is particularly important.
I think, finally, the ongoing legislative efforts at the state level. The bill that could potentially shift the adjudication, the handling of these traffic infractions to city courts like Aurora's.
Right, the potential future change.
Yeah, that represents a future turning point, potentially. It could change not only how these cases are processed, but also where the resulting fines might ultimately end up. So it introduces this element of potential future change to the current landscape.
Okay, so taking all of this into account, the details of the law, the arguments swirling around it, the initial data, these turning points, what's your overall assessment at this early stage? What's the verdict, if you can offer one based on what we know right now?
Well, based on these initial months, it's pretty undeniable that the law has had a significant and demonstrable impact, just in terms of the sheer volume of vehicles being impounded.
The numbers show that clearly.
Right. Aurora has clearly adopted a very direct, very forceful strategy to address this persistent issue of unlicensed, uninsured, and unregistered vehicles. No doubt about that.
Right.
But the long-term consequences and the overall effectiveness, those really remain to be seen. Whether this approach will lead to a substantial and sustained reduction in the number of such drivers on the road, that's still an open question.
And the societal impact.
Exactly. The broader societal impact, particularly on lower income communities, and frankly, the sustainability of this level of enforcement over time. These are all factors that require continued observation and, well, analysis. We're still in the early innings here.
So, boiling it all down, what's the core message here? What's the most crucial takeaway for you listening to keep in mind regarding Aurora's three strikes law?
I think the central takeaway is that this situation in Aurora provides a really compelling case study. A case study of a rather drastic measure being implemented to tackle a long-standing problem.
Problem of unlicensed, uninsured, unregistered drivers.
Precisely. It forces this direct, immediate confrontation with the issue. But in doing so, it also raises some really fundamental and important questions. Questions about fairness, about the potential economic repercussions for individuals.
And that balance.
And that critical balance we must constantly seek between ensuring public safety for everyone and addressing the individual hardships that such strict enforcement can create. At the end of the day, it really highlights how seemingly less serious traffic violations, if they go unaddressed, can trigger a significant domino effect.
Yeah, impacting driving privileges, even the ability to own a vehicle at all. So, is Aurora's decisive action a necessary step towards safer roads? Or is it maybe a punishment that could hit the most vulnerable people the hardest?
Right.
It definitely gives you something to think about the next time you witness a traffic stop, doesn't it?
It really does.
What are your initial thoughts on this intersection of traffic law and everyday life? Something to chew on.